W B Yeats, at the age of 51, in the country house of Lady Gregory at Coole Park in Galway, in the eastern part of Ireland, saw 59 swans in a very joyous spirit. সে তাদেরকে আগেও দেখেছে 19 years before when he first visited the place in the year 1897. Within these 19 years, the swans remains the same. Time has no effect on them, but the poet has gone through many changes. Yes, I am talking about W B Yeats' The Wild Swans at Coole, published in 1919. Before I move on to the line-by-line explanation of the poem, let us discuss in brief the development of Yeats's poetic genius and his theory of poetry. Many critics believe that no great poetry has been written in the 20th century. A.C. Ward says that when the 20th century opened, Tennyson had been died 9 years ago, and there was a widespread impression that English poetry had died with him. The condition can be described using T.S. Eliot's words like a patient etherized upon a table. The fact is that there is a lot of experimentation and innovation in modern poetry. Modern poetry has been exercising a great freedom in the choice of themes. Yeats's theory of poetry is of great importance for a full understanding of his poems. In the early stage of his poetic career, he believed in the theory of art for life's sake. He was in full agreement with the views of his father that dramatic poetry was to be preferred because it was clear and sharp in outline, while the lyric was vague and blurred. But in the 90s, he became the advocate of art for art's sake. Under the influence of the French symbolists and the English aesthetics, he started to write pure poetry, a poetry from which all the exterior decorations had been done away with. In the latter phase, he insisted that the life of the past can be made relevant to the present by the synthetic power of the poet's imagination. Yeats believed that literature is always personal, always one man's vision of the world, one man's experiences. But he also believed that there must be a fusion of the impersonal with the personal, of the objective with the subjective, before really great poetry could be born. But above all, Yeats valued artistic integrity. A poet to him was essentially a visionary who must remain true to his vision. Now let us move to W B Yeats' poetic development. Yeats's poetic development is the history of his evolution of a style which could handle themes of wider importance than those of a personal and private dream world. Yeats's early poetry echoes Spenser, Shelley, and the Pre-Raphaelite. During the 90s, Yeats's poetry became more elaborate, more mysterious, and inscrutable as he distilled the essence of mournful spiritual beauty. At the time, Arthur Symons told him of the French symbolists like Verlaine and Mallarmé. The change in his style first came with the publication in 1903 of the volume In the Seven Woods. Substantial changes in his poetry started showing up only around the year 1910. The major part of the credit for the emergence of Yeats's poetry from its narrow confines goes to James Synge, the writer of Riders to the Sea and the Playboy of the Western World. Responsibilities, published in 1914, is a volume of poems in which Yeats's mature style is first found. One can recognize a new authority in the poems of this volume. What we get here is an almost entirely changed poetry stripped of the decoration and mystery of his earlier works. Yeats, in the words of Ezra Pound, has achieved a new quality of hard life. Yeats's poetic development starts from the romantic themes and is carried from the dreamy rhythms to the treatment of any and every theme in active, inspiring rhythms and a diction perpetually refreshed by contact with common speech. The change in his poetry is gradual and continuous, and the two elements behind his transformation from a dreamy young man into the great poet of the 1920s and 30s are the Easter Rebellion of 1916 and his passion for Maud Gonne. Now it is possible to see four clearly distinct phases in Yeats's poetic career. The first phase, roughly extending from the year 1885 to 1902, is marked by colorful descriptions, elaborate portraits, romantic but vague epithets, decorative details, and sleepy music. All this create a visionary atmosphere where human and superhuman figure glide like phantoms. The Lake Isle of Innisfree and When You Are Old are two poems which can best represent this phase. The second phase, extending 10 years between 1903 and 1913, is a kind of transitional period during which Yeats tried to move towards a more realistic, condensed, and flexible style, which is the characteristics of modern poetry. Two influences are to be noted around this period. The first is of that of Ezra Pound and the second John Donne. In Donne's poetry, he found a unique example of that unity of being which he was struggling to achieve, the blend of sensuality and the coldness of intellect. The better known poems of this period are No Second Troy, Upon a House Shaken by the Land Agitation, The Happy Townland, etc. The third phase, starting with the 1914 volume of poems called Responsibilities, gives us some memorable poems like September 1913, The Wine Songs at Coole, Easter 1916, The Second Coming, A Prayer for My Daughter, Sailing to Byzantium, and others. In fact, it would be no exaggeration to say that the best of Yeats's work is confined to these years. This period sees Yeats arriving at the height of his poetic power and poetic expression. The fourth phase, there is a small subdivision. The last 4 years from 1935 to 1939 are known as the years of the last poems. In this last phase, what is remarkable is the Lear-like mask of tragic abandon which Yeats assumes in many of his key poems. The impending death of civilization is accepted as necessary for poems of a universal process which symbolizes the recurring rhythm of birth, death and rebirth. There is also an element of retrospection, and in many of his great poems there is a visible preoccupation with the monuments of an aging intellect which Yeats talks of in Sailing to Byzantium. Let us now move to our present poem, The Wild Swans at Coole. The poem Wild Swans at Coole is made up of 5 stanzas, each stanza having 6 lines. In the first stanza, the poet describes the lake at the Coole Park. The trees are in their autumn beauty. Autumn, the season which comes between summer and winter. Autumn, the season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, as Keats describes in Ode to Autumn. So the trees are in their autumn beauty, the woodland paths are dry. Under the October twilight, the water mirrors a still sky. Upon the brimming water among the stones are 950 swans. So the trees are in their autumn beauty. So autumn beauty refers to a very somber, a kind of ripe beauty. The woodland paths are dry. The paths leading to the woods are dry because though it is autumn, the rain has not yet started. Okay. Under the October twilight, twilight is the subdued light just after sunset. This phrase autumn, dry, twilight, this talks about the atmosphere, the outer environment and also the poet's somber mood. Okay. Under the October twilight, the water mirrors, that reflects a still sky. The sky is very calm, still. So the sky is not only still but also the water of the lake is also very calm, it's very still. The word still, we will find that the word still will be using again and again in the poem. Okay. Upon the brimming water, brimming, that is overflowing. Upon the brimming water among the stones are 950 swans. So the October twilight setting and the dry woodland paths on which the poet works are contrasted with the brimming water on which these 59 swans are floating. Okay. So why the number 9 and 50, why 59 and not 60, why and kind of an even number and not an odd one? The 19th autumn has come upon me since I first made my count. I saw before I had well finished all suddenly mount and scatter wheeling in great broken rings upon their clamorous wings. So the first stanza was in the present tense and now the opening line of the second stanza is in the perfect one, and from the perfect one we move into the past one. Okay. So has, from has there is transformation to had. The 19th autumn has come upon me since I first made my count. I saw before I had well finished all suddenly mount and scatter wheeling in great broken rings upon their clamorous wings. So the very first stanza was in the present tense and now the very beginning of the second stanza is in the perfect one. The 19th autumn has come upon me. So the perfect tense of the opening line, it contrasts with the present tenses of the opening stanza, and the change in this stanza from has to had. In the third line we have I saw before I had well finished. So from has to had. So this change conveys an almost brutal finality in the Swans' premature departure. So the 19 autumn has come upon me. I have spent 19 years, 19 autumn, and these years, these 19 years in the poet's life are described in respect of the season autumn. Again, a season when the trees becomes the leaves of the trees becomes yellow just before their death. Okay. I saw before I had well finished, all suddenly mound. So all the swans, they suddenly fled. Okay. And scatter means disperse, and disperse wheeling, that is moving in circles, wheeling in great broken rings upon their clamorous wings. So clamorous wings means noisy wings. The figures of speech onomatopoeia is used here where the sound echoes the sense. The clamorous wings refers to the noisy wings as the swans were flying up. I have looked upon those brilliant creatures. Look at the adjective, brilliant. And now my heart is sore. So looking at these brilliant creatures who remain the same as I have found them in 19 years before, my heart becomes sad and bitter. All changed since I hearing at twilight. Again the twilight of the first stanza comes again. Okay, hearing at twilight the first time on this shore the bell-beat of their wings upon my head. Bell-beat, that is a loud sound as of bells. Okay, kind of metaphor is used here. The bell-beat of their wings above my head, trod with a lighter tread. Trod, that is walked with a lighter tread, means a slow and a very cautious kind of walking. Now all changed in the life of the poet within these 19 years. Okay. The Easter Rising of 1916, the experience of Yeats in the struggle of Irish freedom movement, the influence of James Synge on the poet, it has made a considerable change in his attitude towards life, but the swans, they remain the same. Unwearied still, lover by lover. Again the word still is used here. Okay, but the meaning of this still is something different from the still which is used at the very first stanza of the poem. Unwearied still, that is, they are not tired, still they are not tired. 19 years have passed, but within these 19 years there is no change in the swans. They are not at all tired, they are still unwearied, and they are in loving couples, they are in lover by lover, pair by pair. They paddle in the cold, companionable streams or climb the air. So they paddle, that means they swim by cutting the water with their webbed feet. Companionable, that is pleasant streams or climb the air. Their hearts have not grown old. So the hearts of the swan, it remain the same, whereas in the poet there is many changes. Okay, the poet has grown old. The poet is thinking of the death of his love for Maud Gonne and possibly thinking of Isolde Gonne, to whom he proposed marriage in 1960s and 1917. Passion or conquest wander where they will. So this is an exceptional quality to those swans which I lack. So wherever they go, they carry with them the passion and conquest. Passion or conquest wander where they will attend upon them still. Again the word still is used. This third and fourth stanza, they are full of some subjective note about poet's own feelings. Okay, but now they drift. So the swans, they refers to the swans. They drift means they go aimlessly on the still water. Again, use of the word still, and this is the fourth time that the word still is used in this short poem. But now they drift on the still water, mysterious, beautiful. Among what rushes will they build? Rushes refers to the marsh or waterside plant. Okay. By what lake's edge or pool delight men's eyes when I awake someday to find they have flown away? Now, the linking of the still water to the still sky, which is reflected in it, the swans are able, unlike men, to live in two elements. The first is to be mortal, they are in loving pairs, lover by lover, and yet somewhat immortal, that is unwearied still, and they lead yet to the question with which the poem ends, and it ends with the curiosity on the part of the poet as to where the swans will make their abode next when he will awake later. Now what you find in this poem is that subjective tone is there, very personal elements are there, but again that personal elements are becoming impersonal and universal. So the subjective tone is becoming very much objective. So the time, it has a little effect on the elements of nature, but time is taking away everything from the poet. Okay, so this is how we find that Yeats is becoming here from a romantic to a neo-romantic. The most important symbol in the poem seems to be the swans. In one sense, they represent the life force, and in another, they represent an union between time and timeless. The number 59, as I have said at the very beginning, is very symbolic. It refers that 28 swans have got their mates, and there is only a single one who is alone. That refers to W B Yeats, who ultimately failed to marry his beloved Maud Gonne in his life. In many poems of Yeats, like No Second Troy, A Prayer for My Daughter, we find a direct references to Maud Gonne. So the personal elements comes again and again in his poem, like this poem. Okay, but the personal becomes very much impersonal. Okay, and this is Yeats's genius. In the next video, I am going to discuss some important MCQ questions from this text. For that, you need to subscribe the channel and press the bell icon so that you can get the notification when I upload that video.